Good afternoon. My name is Megan Forsman, and I am an AmeriCorps Program Officer with the Michigan Community Service Commission. I'd like to share a warm welcome to all of you for the last session of the day. You are in the Accidental Trainer, applying engaging immersive facilitation techniques to elevate your organization's learning initiatives. While we don't have the opportunity to see each other in person, we're very pleased to be able to share this virtual conference space with you. And our presenter today is Barry Atland. I'm very pleased to introduce you to him, and feel free to use the chat box throughout the session. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Barry.
Megan, thank you so much. I'm grateful, and I will promise all of our participants for this afternoon that as you read the title, the Accidental Trainer, it's probably that many of you consider yourself by that title. That learning is part of your job role in the way that you serve volunteers and the way that you serve your community. I will also promise you that it's probably the last time that you're going to hear me use that T word, trainer. I'm not a fan of the word. Instead, I love the word facilitator, because that's what I feel a learning leader should do. They should be facilitating learning conversations. And that's going to be the focus of our time together. So it is my hope that you, over these last 2 years, have leveraged this odd and crazy, peculiar circumstance that we have all encountered. We've all endured this, to rethink everything that you do in your role, especially. I found it a wonderful opportunity to rethink pretty much everything in my life. And I have forced myself to read some really uncomfortable stuff that has expanded my ways of thinking. And I'm so grateful that I've made those choices. So yes, use this time to rethink what is going on, especially in the way that you serve your volunteers and your team members, and the way that you support their continued development. So that's going to be our focus. Let's do that while I continue to talk about this topic, and I'm going to invite you into this conversation. I would love to know your name, your organization that you represent, and also in what city you're currently sitting. If you could add that in the chat box, let's blow that chat box up. That would be fantastic. And I want to make one more point as we dive into this content. I want to get real about how learning works, because you are not going to suddenly become a master facilitator in the next 45 minutes. Put that thought out of your mind. That's not going to happen. In fact, I'll be lucky, I'll be fortunate if I can get you to begin to think a little bit differently about your role as that accidental facilitator, accidental leader of learning in your organization, by recognizing that what we've been doing for a really long time, it's just not working. And I'm going to expound on that thought in just a moment, but you may be thinking, why is there a bag of potatoes on my screen right now? It's because you cannot fit 10 pounds of learning in a 5-pound sack. You just can't do it. So I'm not going to attempt during our 45 minutes together. It's just not enough time. But allow me to plant a seed. Allow me to just share a few thoughts that will hopefully get you to begin to think differently, because we have all had this impression placed upon us through all of our academic experiences, through all of our business experiences, and so many other exposures, that we begin to believe that traditional didactic learning is the go-to move. And I strongly suggest that maybe it should not be. But instead, we have to embrace that immersive, interactive, social learning is the way to go for our future. And in fact, it should have always been that way since the dawn of learning. In fact, maybe it has been, because Socrates would suggest that the Socratic method of asking others questions and inviting them into their own learning experience was the better way to go. But somehow we went off course, and we embraced this model that you see on the left side of your screen. That model that somehow the expert, the person at the front of the room, is the person to whom we should give reverence. We should sit silently and let them pontificate while we feign, we pretend, and let's be honest with each other. That's what we do. We pretend that we're hanging on their every word. Whereas, likely, if your brain is anything like mine, you're probably wondering about different things. You're considering your grocery list for tonight. You're pondering something else because our brains tend to wander. However, if we're pulled into our own learning experience, if we're included, if we have a facilitator who is drawing us in, then chances are we are not distracted. We are wholly engaged. So just planting that seed right now. And let's talk about engagement, your engagement for this session. Megan, am I seeing anything in the chat yet, or is it dry?
We are not. It is dry. So I can.
Is anybody even out there? I wonder.
I will put something in the chat box for people to tell us their name and where they're currently located right now.
Well, if they are out there, they probably are doing what I was doing a bit of, I'm going to be honest, transparent, throughout this afternoon, which was multitasking. And I would love to challenge all of our learners to just set aside the multitasking for the next 37 minutes, and let's see if we can wholly engage. I would love to see some fingers moving in the chat box. In fact, my efforts are going to fall flat if we do not see some engagement, because I'm encouraging you to develop a back channel conversation. Chat with each other in the chat box while you are tuned in to what Megan and I are sharing with each other. That's what I would love for you to do. And let's see if we can begin that by me asking this simple question. What was it about this topic that attracted you to be a part of this session? Megan, let's see if we can maybe get some responses to that question. There's Laura, at least. I see that pop up. Hi, Laura.
Laura's in Ann Arbor. Go blue.
You know, I thought about that as I put this red shirt on. It's really a bright red shirt. It in no way honors that other state next to yours. Not a fan of them. So I should have put on a blue or a green shirt for today. There's Alex as well. Now I'm seeing that delay kicking in. I'm grateful. I see that she's from Detroit, and I was just in Detroit about 2 months ago and had a fantastic time in that city. So yeah, very good. Let's see if we can get a few of our friends to answer that why question. 10 words or less. Answer, what was it about this topic that attracted you to engage in this session at the end of your day today? Because your why, it matters. And if you're serving others, especially volunteers, then understanding the why of others is mission critical. So I would love to hear a few of your why reasons. What was it about that topic that may have attracted you? And there's Laura popping in. I see a few others finally jumping into the chat box. Very good. All right, and I'll continue to press forward here. You know, Megan, I feel like I have to have a transparency moment as we're here right now, and before I expound on that, I attended today to learn more about being that trainer. I am that trainer with my agency. Yeah, Laura, you are not alone. I can guarantee you that there are many others who fall backwards. That's the way that I describe it. They fall backwards into this role. There is this expectation that just because they have that job title, that they are some sort of expert in the way that adults learn. And Megan, what does that say for Alex right there? If you can help me out with Alexandria.
She said, because I often unofficially fall into this role. So similar to what you were just saying.
It happens. It happens. In fact, I'm going to ask you, Megan, to read those for me when they pop up, because it's that corner of my flat screen on my desk is tucked behind something else. So I have to crane my neck a bit to be able to see those words at the bottom of the chat box. So if you can read those for us, I would love to hear your voice throughout our session.
I sure will.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's keep those whys rolling in. I want to know. I want to know what it is that's stirring in your heart that brought you into this session. And as well, I think that we need to do some level setting. Let's set this clear, because if you do not understand this concept, then it's not likely that you will be performing in that learning leader role at a high level. And this is a really simple concept, but wrote about this in my book, and I suggested that it might be the most misunderstood concept in all of leadership. And yet it's so simple. And yet somehow we've all been, or most of us have been, misguided in our understanding about motivation. There are only two types. And if we were totally synchronous right now and we had a room full of active participants, and if I could see your faces and you could take yourselves off of mute and I could hear your voices and all those things that I wish were happening right now, I would say, hey, what are those two types of motivation?
And Barry, Rachel shared, we are seeking to increase the value of professional development activities for our 55 and up volunteers, and believe that connections and hands-on learning is key, but also challenging for me when considering the population.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're saying that, Rachel, because yes, do not let that go. Connections are a critical part of learning. Learning is social. When it's at its best, learning is social. And learning also has to be hands-on. I completely agree with you. To just sit back and be a passive attendee, that's a word that I often hear at conferences. Not a fan of that word, because I prefer participant or learner, because it accurately describes what we want somebody else to do, how we want them to perform. We want them to participate. So let's refer to them as a participant. We want them to learn. So let's call them a learner. If we want somebody to just warm a seat, call them an attendee, because they're only attending. So words matter. And Rachel, do not let go of that. And I think I know what you mean for your elder generation. And I can't believe I just said that, because I'm 55, so I'm in that category. But yeah, I probably, for health reasons, there are some hesitancy to come together in the same space as well. I'm going to say this boldly, is that many people, even older than I am, are so damaged by their life of learning experiences that it's difficult for many of them to be drawn into their own learning experience, to introduce them to interactive and immersive learning, because they've just spent 50 or 60 or more years being indoctrinated into thinking that it's their job to sit there silently and listen to somebody else. And yeah, I'm being a bit harsh in the way that I describe that, but I just want to be honest, because that's been my observation. I've been studying this for 20 plus years, and that's reality. That is all we know. And we're just getting to a point where we're recognizing in our school systems the value of more immersive and interactive learning. And we're slowly turning that cruise ship turn. But it's going to take many, many years for us to get there. So, Rachel, don't let it go. Don't let it go. Let's get back to our motivation topic. Only two types. So I would ask for a show of hands in the room, and somebody would raise their hand and say, positive and negative. And I hear that one often to this question. And I would say, it's a thought. It's a great thought. And I can understand why you might think that. And then somebody else would say, internal and external. I'm like, oh, okay, now we're moving in the right direction. Let's put the fancy words on it. Intrinsic and extrinsic. And let me give you a simple definition that will help you to understand the difference between these two. Intrinsic. That's the reason why I've been asking you to answer the why question. I want to know your intrinsic motivation. What stirs in your heart? What matters to you? What are your needs, your wants, your desires, the things that are important to you? and the things that it's this unique cocktail, if you will, that stirs within all of our hearts that compels us to do everything that we choose to do every day of our lives. That is your intrinsic motivation. It drives every one of the volunteers who serves alongside your organizations. Intrinsic motivation. In contrast to that, extrinsic motivation, and I'm not seeing any activity in the chat box, so if there's anything that I'm saying that inspires a thought, you benefit your peers, you're exercising social learning if you add that thought into the chat box. I am strongly encouraging you to do that. Do more than just sit there and listen, but be an active participant in any way that you can, which is through the chat box for our time together today. Back to extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic is an effort made by somebody else to get you to do what they want you to do. And money is the classic. I often hear in volunteer recognition, I hear people talk about events and lunches and awards and ribbons and tchotchkes and plaques and all of those things. And yes, you can probably tell by my tone of voice what my thoughts are about all of those efforts at extrinsic motivation, because one size never fits all. Intrinsic motivation is where it's at, and it is unique to each of us. And if we understand that concept, we are then ready to be a learning leader, because all of our learners, those you serve, they have unique needs. So Jean Piaget, he's the first of our two theorists that I'm going to introduce to you. If you've heard of Jean Piaget, give me a little shout out in the chat box. He mastered constructivist learning theory, and he knows, in fact, the entire Montessori type of school is built upon his theories. And he knows what he is talking about. He knows that learners want to be the masters of their own domains, that they want to be included in their own learning. But yet, as we look at these two pictures on the screen, we have to embrace that we've not really evolved all that much when it comes to the way that we approach learning from the early or mid 1900s or before that time to 2021. We have not evolved as much as we should have. And I see that Laura are both familiar with Piaget. Good, because that is an important theory that a lot of this recommendation rests upon. So all of that to say, getting back to this note on social learning, including your participants in their own learning experience is where it's at. We have to let the presentations go. And yes, I've been forced to do a presentation during these 45 minutes. I'm working really, really hard to include you. It takes many, many people to play along. We have to be willing participants. So that is why I'm encouraging you to be a participant in our learning conversation today. I would love to see you light up the chat box. Please light it up and share your words, share your thoughts with others, respond to each other, so you can help me to break out of this presentation mode. I know that most of my peers throughout the day, that's what they've been doing. You have likely also been programmed into thinking that that's what this conference event is supposed to be. I'm working hard at the end of the day to see if we can break that cycle. Help me out. Help me out, because I do believe that presentations have to go away in order for us to embrace this model. This model is called the learner engagement model. It's a pretty simple concept. I designed this about 20 years ago, and I did include it in my published work. And fairly simple framework that is to be used. This is your tool. This is your takeaway from our learning today. To design and to facilitate your learning initiatives moving forward. Yeah, share Laura's voice. Go ahead, Megan.
Yep, we have another comment from Laura. Virtual has really pushed me to train others about how to be interactive in our community outreach education sessions.
Yes. Even that word education is sort of just assumes, and I hear this all the time, we have to educate other people. In my full-time job, I work in financial capability, and I hear my financial capability practitioner peers say that all the time. We have to educate others on financial literacy. And I cringe a little bit every time I hear that, because you can't educate somebody else. They have to want to learn. They have to have the intrinsic motivation and be open to learning. All we can do is create the environment where somebody else can learn. We cannot guarantee that we will educate others. Instead, they have to come to the table ready and willing to learn. So yeah, virtual has changed the game, but I'm going to address that in a bit, Laura, because it hasn't changed the game as much as it's exposed the game. It's exposed the game. It's exposed what we've always been doing may not have been all that good to begin with. I know, a bold statement, but I feel strongly about this, and I've been studying this now for the last 20 months, and some truths are coming out. Back to my model, the learner engagement model. Consider it as two rows, the top row and then the bottom row. I'm going to look at all of these together. So the top row first, where what I'm doing right now, that is what the top row in this model refers to. Now, as you can see on the right side of this simple framework, I eventually am going to recommend an approximate amount of airtime. Well, I am not role modeling that airtime that I desire for all of you to embrace. I'm not role modeling it right now. I would love to be. Help me out. Help me out by adding more thoughts into the chat box. Questions, inspirations, thoughts that come to mind, whatever it might be. Let's talk a bit more about this bottom row in the learner engagement model. The first one is learner to facilitator. How do I get all of you to communicate back to me in a learning environment? Well, I'm trying. I'm trying right now. And if I can see your face, let me give you an example, because right now I am the primary facilitator to get VITA volunteers. VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. VITA volunteers must become IRS certified. I facilitate a 12-hour workshop entirely virtually. Now, that 12-hour workshop is broken down into 4 3-hour sessions, because making somebody or expecting somebody to sit in Zoom for 12 hours is inhumane. Yes, I said that. Inhumane. Do not do that. But 3 hours, when you can make 3 hours interactive, yes, absolutely. In fact, 3 hours flies by really quickly, because I have my camera here. I have one screen over here. I have a flat screen to my left. I'm gesturing to my flat screen TV on my desk, where I can see all 90 plus of those participant faces, because I set the expectation that they are on camera for all 3 hours, and about 90+% of them abide by my request. I set it as an expectation. I can't force anybody to do it. I honor if somebody is unable to do it, but I do set it as a high expectation, and get about 90% of those who appear. And then I can get them, once I can see them and hear them in Zoom, I love Zoom, by the way, then they can communicate back to me, learner to facilitator. And how I do it is by using open-ended questions. So I'm going to challenge all of you right now. Let's do some rapid skill practice in the moment. I would love for you to enter an open-ended question that begins with the words who, what, when, where, why, or how on the topic of potatoes. That's your topic. That's your assignment right now. And Megan, hopefully we'll see some examples roll in. Let's do some skill building in the moment, open-ended questions on the topic of potatoes. And when they roll in, Megan, we will get a chance to take a look at them, and we will assess them in the moment to see how well our participants have done at crafting open-ended questions. Because as a facilitator, Here's what I strongly believe. If you can master that skill, you can not only be a high-level facilitator, I boldly suggest you can be a high-level leader as well, because leaders invite others into conversations. And how do they do it? Open-ended questions. Open-ended questions give us the ability to stop talking and listen to others so we can learn and we can include them. Yes, this is the ultimate form of inclusion. Facilitation is the ultimate form of inclusion. I was listening to my friend Jerome Tennille earlier today in one of our conference sessions, and he was talking about how important all of that is. I agree with him. And we have to practice it every day, practice it in your learning initiatives by including those you serve, your volunteers, your team members. Include them in the learning conversation. That's as inclusive as we can get by making sure that every voice has an opportunity to be heard. Learner to content is the next item that is in our framework. And I'll give you lots of examples where you can engage with content. A worksheet works really well. Getting others to engage with their phone, their mobile device, fantastic. Getting them to watch video, also really, really good. Flip charting, either virtually or live in person. Also, yeah, ways.
Got a question. When are potatoes at their best?
Yes. I know that potatoes are grown in Michigan, aren't they?
I'm sure they are, yes.
They are, yeah. In fact, I worked for an agribusiness earlier in my career who had some property in the state of Michigan, and I believe that was their primary crop was potatoes.
All right.
Yeah.
I know they're grown in Idaho.
That's true as well. Yes. And let me just finish up that thought. Learner to content engagement, including that in our design, flip charting, asking for input like I'm doing right now. That would be learner to content engagement. What does Laura have to say?
Laura is saying, what about tell me questions rather than who, what, why, how?
Laura, you're uncovering something, and I love it. I love it because you're talking about open-ended statements that are not phrased in the form of a question, yet work equally well. They work equally well to a question, an open-ended question. The goal is for you to end that sentence and then just stop talking. And the people or person with whom you're engaged, they have a very clear expectation that now it's their turn. So yes, tell me about a time when. And that's baked into the behavior-based interview model. Some of you may be familiar with that. It works extremely well. So Laura, nice work. Yes, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of whether it's a phrase or a question, they both work really well as long as they are open-ended, cannot be answered with a yes or a no. That's the key part. And I'm going to make another bold statement. Most people who think they're really good at asking open-ended questions kind of stink at asking open-ended questions. I have observed facilitators. In fact, it's one of the ways that I've built my own skills is that I listen to others when they're attempting to facilitate. And I hear a lot of closed-ended questions, and participants usually don't know what to do in those moments. They don't know how to answer. But I've discovered that if you ask open-ended questions, that your participants clearly know what to do in those moments. And before you know it, you're guiding a conversation. You're facilitating a conversation. I also have attempted to encourage all of you to interact with each other. I've noticed that in these platforms that a lot of participants are not accustomed to doing that. They're not accustomed to having what I call a back channel conversation. When we're together live in person, if I have enough time in a session, that I want small group conversation to happen. In fact, I often will lead off a workshop by having people come into the room and immediately I put them into small groups so that they're interacting with each other. It works extremely well. It opens up the doors. It makes people feel included because often a percentage of those who are reaching They won't feel comfortable speaking up in front of a large group of people. But if you put them in a smaller group of 3 or 4, they are more likely to speak up and to engage and share. So inclusion to me is so critical. Learner to learner engagement. I love doing it in Zoom as well. I love breakout groups. As long as they're managed well and the expectations are clear, I find that breakout sessions within Zoom can work extremely well to get learners to engage with each other. And then finally, oh, you know what, before I press on, write in the chat box the first thought that comes to mind when you see this at a live conference. And praise be, I hope that someday soon we get back to live conferences so that we can all be in the same room together. There is no replacement for live learning when it's facilitated well. The problem is that most times live learning is not facilitated well. It becomes a presentation and we squander opportunities for us to engage with each other. But I'm interested, what is the one word that comes to mind when you see this? You walk into a room and you see this arrangement. I'm curious. One word is what I would love to hear. And Megan, pop in as soon as,
lecture.
Yes. Laura S is she is our star engager during this session. Would love to have some of our other 20 friends.
Both Lauras have been contributing.
Yes. Team Laura, go
Team Laura. Laura squared.
Yes, exponential Laura. I like it. Very good. Hey, yeah, lecture. What an ugly, ugly word. Not a fan, because lecture, presentation, instruction, all of those, speaker, that's another one. All of these are words that I've just chosen to eliminate from my vocabulary because they carry with them connotations. This type of room setup, if you see it, has a connotation to it. How do you get people to engage with each other when we've set up a room to say, stare at the back of the person in front of you?
Quiet is another one from Alexandria.
Alex, yes, quiet, meaning I am going to stand behind the podium and I'm going to pontificate. I'm going to bestow my wisdom down upon all of you. And yes, I did say down upon all of you because I do think that there's a bit of leveling that goes on in these types of situations. It's unspoken, but yet it's there. It's there. I believe in inclusion. I believe that learners, participants have something of value to bring. We have to invite them in and allow them to bring it. This room setup doesn't allow them. It really is not conducive. But when I go to a conference and I see this, now that thrills me because I see that the setup it's conducive to engagement, learner to learner engagement. Now, let's touch on the last part of the model, learner to self. We want to encourage our learners to be able to have time for introspection. That could be when working on exercises or worksheets or even taking notes. That's time within ourselves when we're taking notes. Journaling, I believe in that. Action planning, in other words, we're answering this simple question for ourselves as learners. Okay, I learned something. What do I plan to do with it? How am I going to apply it? What support will I need while I'm attempting to apply what I have learned? Those are all critical questions to answer, and learner to self engagement, a very important part of this model. So now we understand all of the elements of this model, and I know we have about 10 minutes or so left. Airtime. I'm blowing it right now. I'm totally knocking this out of the water. I'm nowhere near what I'm about to suggest for all of you because I think the approximate airtime should be at least a balance. Now, if I were to ask you what's real, what is it most times in your learning sessions? What is it most times in the other learning sessions in which you've engaged as a participant? It's probably more like what I'm doing right now. And I lament that. I wish that I could see your face. I wish that I could hear your voice, because you would have heard a lot less of mine. I would have sought to attain that 50-50 balance. So this learner engagement model is my token to you. Feel free to embrace it. When you're designing learning, you must be intentional about the way that you design learning. And when you facilitate learning, you must be intentional in the way that you facilitate learning. And as you include all of these elements and you work toward a 50-50 balance, then yes, you can get there. So one more question to include all of you, and then I'm going to go rapid fire through a few notes, and then we'll close out. I'm curious, why do you think Zoom fatigue occurs? I did already allude to my perspective. I'm going to elaborate on it in just a moment, but I would love to hear your voice first. Why do you think Zoom fatigue is a thing? And I hear people talk about it as if Zoom or these platforms are the culprit. And I boldly suggest that maybe they are not, but maybe it's the way that we've been using the platforms that have created this phenomenon of Zoom fatigue. So try 10 words or less, because it allows you to type faster. Why do you think Zoom fatigue occurs? Megan, let me ask you that question. Why do you think Zoom fatigue occurs?
I think that there is something different about being on camera versus being in person. And when you can connect in person, you can experience the energy of other people in the room. And I think it can be challenging when you have the video to video.
Yeah, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. We can choose. My goodness, we've been doing this. How long have you been FaceTiming in your life, Megan?
Oh, goodness. Would the last 5 to 10 years? I don't even know.
Right. Now, why would you be FaceTiming for the last 5 to 10 years if you could make a phone call?
I think I probably prefer phone calls mostly, but it is nice to see faces, you know.
It is. Well, and I challenge all of you. There is a study called the Moravian study, MEH, and maybe you can type this in for us, Megan. MEHRABIAN. MEHRABIAN. And I'll nutshell this study, the Moravian studies, basically saying that nonverbal communication sends more than half of the message of whenever we communicate with other human beings. So if we can't see each other's faces, we're taking away more than half of the way that we typically communicate when we're live in person with each other. So yeah, sure, Laura.
Yep, we do have some comments. So Aaron said it's easy to be distracted. It's like listening to the radio, you zone out. Alexandria said because the experience is incomplete. And Alexandria actually agreed with what Aaron was saying. And Laura H says people are scheduling meeting after meeting since we are always at the computer. People do not know how to facilitate an interactive meeting.
Laura and Aaron and Alex, yes to everything that you just said. And I completely agree that people just do not know how to facilitate an interactive meeting. And I could get into my theories on why that is, and and its roots in dominance and subjugation. And oh my goodness, I could bore you with all of my theories on why. I plan on doing a dissertation someday on this topic because I'm so fascinated by it. Why do we not want to include other people's voices in our learning conversations? We should. We must, if we ever hope to change this dynamic. So my suggestion, as I've alluded, is that Zoom fatigue is not really what we think it is. We're blaming the platform when I agree with Laura. We don't know how to facilitate an interactive meeting. Most of us don't know how to do it when we're live in the same room with others. So why would we expect that we could magically do it when we're in the virtual space? It's a skill. We have to honor the skill. We have to build the skill. I've spent 20 years building this skill, and now I have to I have to forego it for 45 minutes.
Aaron had another great comment. The delay makes conversation hard and awkward, which is true. Sometimes those technology challenges can really contribute to that fatigue.
Yeah, I tell you, I use Zoom a ton, and I have figured out over these last 2 years, and I love it. I love it because we have broken down all of these challenges that we just mentioned right here. We have figured out how to use Zoom to create interactive and immersive learning. It's possible. I'm telling you, it's possible because I'm living it through my full-time work, and I love it. I love it because I feel so connected to people, even though I'm sitting here in my PJ pants right now. True story. And I have no idea how they are dressed, even though I had a gentleman last night. He kept shooing his wife away from the camera because she was not wearing a top over her brassiere. So he kept pushing her away. I'm like, yeah, we can all see her. Yeah, we see her. But yet, there's an intimacy to this experience if we allow it to become that. If we attempt to connect through this virtual space, it's possible. Laura, share Laura's voice.
Laura said, well, Laura S agreed with everything that was said. And then Laura H just said, I do a 20+ training on Zoom, lots of breakout rooms.
Love it. I'm glad that you do. You have to be intentional about the culture of engagement that you hope to create for your organization. This is not going to magically happen. You must be intentional about it. And the way that you do it is we have to get rid of one-way delivery or reduce it dramatically. You have to learn how to master those open-ended questions and invite other people into the learning conversation. It takes time to develop that, but honor it. Honor it. Write down your questions. A few of you proved that you can write an open-ended question pretty darn well about potatoes, a random topic like potatoes. So write them down in advance. Have them there in front of you so you don't have to whip them up off the cuff, but instead you have them written down in front of you, and you can just pretend as though you've made it up in the moment as you read that open-ended question. Use platforms that foster engagement. So yeah, I mentioned Zoom. Zoom is one that I know, I can guarantee you works well, and it sounds like Laura can back me up on that. Share Aaron's voice.
Aaron said, I've been in breakout rooms where no one will talk. The rooms need agendas or questions or guidance. So
Yes.
true.
Yep, plant that open-ended question. Make sure that everybody is clear on it. I tell my participants to take a picture of what they see on their screen. I put the open-ended question on the PowerPoint slide in big letters. Then they take a picture of it. They carry that with them into the breakout session, and then they have a clear expectation of what they're supposed to do when they're there. What's Aaron's voice saying now?
She's saying, as a trainer, I worry breakout rooms will not accomplish what I want. Just one person does all the work.
Well, yes, I appreciate those concerns. Do not let them inhibit you from using interactive techniques. Use them because and be relentless about it, because you will soon shift the culture within your team. They'll come to expect camera ready expectation. They will come to expect that you're going to do something meaningful during those times, that you're not there to entertain them while they passively sit back and watch as an audience member. I never use that word in the learning environment either. We don't want audience members, we want participants. So don't seek to entertain them, seek to deliver something and include them in something that's meaningful for them. And also, don't try to do live and virtual at the same time. You are guaranteed to doing both not well, but focus on both separately because they deserve that kind of attention. And then finally, tell less. Do less of what I just did for the last 45 minutes, and instead ask more. Ask more. That is my guidance, because this model will do you well. And I know that we have just one more minute. So here's your other theorist. I'm going to go through it quickly. Donald Kirkpatrick. If you have a phone or a laptop nearby, Google Donald Kirkpatrick. And what you'll learn is there is this model that reminds us that an evaluation at the end of your learning event is not nearly as important as what your participants learn, what they choose to do with what they learn, and ultimately, let me go back just a moment, what results your organization attains based upon what has been learned. So important, because all of this engagement, you cannot lay a blanket over others. It happens one person at a time because our intrinsic motivators are unique to us. Megan, I'm grateful for everybody whose voice we heard, and even for those who we did not hear. As long as they hung in there, I'm hoping that you found something of value. It was my honor to serve.
Thank you, Barry, so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise for all of us, or with all of us. And we appreciate all of our learners and participants with us today. We hope you enjoy the last little bit of the conference that we have left, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.